G'day y'all, it's The Edward Show. I'm your host, Edward Fox, and together we're going to dive into the lives and stories of extraordinary individuals I meet from every corner of our globe. G'day y'all, it's The Edward Show. We got another great episode for you today. Rowan van Dyk out in Namibia, a country in Africa. Also a cricket-playing nation that has its days at beating the rest of the bigger countries around it and around the world. So Rowan van Dyk is the owner of DNL Training and also the author of, what was it, like 18 books, Rowan?
Right about there, I think 17 or 18, okay. I've lost count.
Okay. Being South African, having letters turn into words and writing whole books, that's an accomplishment.
Well, as I said, I try and keep my brain busy. So
yeah. I had a South African friend. I'm an Aussie living in Nashville, Tennessee, originally in Wichita, Kansas for 30 years, built my own cricket field, and my wife's a pharmacist. And so a lot of South African pharmacists got picked up and brought over to work in pharmacy in the US, Osco Drug and a couple of others. And she said, oh, there's a new South African guy at the local pharmacy. He's a pharmacist. He might like to play cricket. And I said, okay, I'll go down and talk to him. So I walk in there and I say, g'day, my name's Ed Fox. I'm an Aussie. And he says, I'm sorry about that. He says, I got a joke for you. Never met the guy before, right? He says, I got a joke for you. He says, an Australian, a South African, and a lion were locked in a room together, and there was a rifle with one bullet, and the South African had it. What did he do? He said he shoots the Australian because his mate, the lion, has to eat. And he thought that was hilarious. And so I laughed, and I left the pharmacy, and we set up a time. And all the people he works with said, do you know that guy? He goes, no, I never met him before in my life. Well, you're a bit mean to him. Nah, he's an Aussie. He'll get it. No big deal. But they gave him a hard time the rest of the day about what he said to me. So I'm like, we're used to that. We're used to picking on each other. So you're in Namibia. You own DNL Training. How long have you owned that training company for?
I have the one in South Africa that I've owned for about 25, 26 years. And the one in Namibia I owned for about 7 years, and I recently sold it to a larger training company who I now work for. I develop programs for them, and that sort of still in the line of writing. So
right. And so what got you into starting a training company in South Africa 25 years ago?
Well, it's I suppose, and I know in the early years the Aussies were on the forefront with the Americans in fighting apartheid. So I actually got into it because of reverse apartheid. Okay. At the time, South Africa had become a democratic country, and we were implementing what the Americans called affirmative action. In South Africa, it's called employment equity. And it was obviously the blacks are by far the largest population group. So it was trying to reintroduce or introduce them into the workplace. So as a male over 40 and white, I was on the bottom of the food chain. So I was already working as a group training manager for an organization who then closed down. So I got retrenched, and I toyed with the idea of starting my own business for a long time, and luckily got pushed into it. So although somebody would see it as something bad, at the time, I suppose it did feel that way, but it actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise.
Right. I think during COVID, a lot of Americans moved from corporate world because they got fed up and they had the choice of starting their own business. You not so much, but it worked out for the best.
Well, COVID again, what COVID did was because of lockdown and everything, again, pushed me in another direction. So I took all my face-to-face training and went online with it. So I had time to sit at home and keep myself busy and do it online.
And are you finding that the online courses are working well for a lot of people?
Yeah, yes, I think a lot of the training that we still do here is more a hybrid or a blended type of setup that works. So there's a lot of online. I do a lot of online, but again, depends. I work also with apart from leadership and that, I also work with this organization in the retail space. So when you got your lower level retail employees, they tend to respond better to face. It's not, people say they're not tech savvy, but I don't think it's the tech savvy. I just think it's strange. They're not used to that type of thing. But when I work higher up the chain, like with leaders or CEOs or even managers and that, they tend to buy into the online a lot more, obviously, because it's time saving. You don't have to travel, that type of thing. So
yeah, if we have a chance of being more productive, that it enables us to do that. So I was just having this discussion last night where I've got a friend that wants to start another networking group in the Nashville area for content creators and YouTubers and influencers and stuff. And he's like, should we do online or should we do in person? I said, I already know what you're thinking, Cody. And he said, yeah, I want to do in person because you can just build that relationship better. I think you can build a relationship like this over Zoom and FaceTime and the rest, but it takes extra work. You've got to be more vulnerable and more open to building that relationship. And I think one of the things you were talking about and your focus is relationship leadership, right? Relationship-based leadership. Tell me what that means to you.
Well, relational leadership to me is exactly that, building relationships. And it's a question of communicating. And that's what training is about. That's what consulting is about. Now, just to backstep quickly, you mentioned about building relationships and face-to-face. You can do that online if you have smaller groups like one-on-one like us, or there are 3 or 4 people that you can see and you can communicate. I've done a couple of online conferences that there are 700, 800, 900 people and they're little blips on the screen. So there's no connection there. You have no idea whether they're listening to you or they're off making a cup of coffee somewhere. So that type of thing in person works because there's that contact, that they're there. With building relationships, so for me in leadership, the biggest problem that we have is teams are disengaged. So if you look at Gallup and all these studies, they'll tell you 85% of teams are disengaged and they're not engaged. And the reason is that they're doing a job. I'm not going to get into the boomers and the millennials and all the rest of it, but we work with a different caliber person now. And also with COVID and with remote leadership and all that type of thing, there's not that connection. So to build that connection and to build that relationship, there needs to start or firstly be communication, and the ultimate that you're looking for is mutual trust. So if I'm building a relationship, if you take a marriage, for instance, if there is communication, I mean, I've been married for 35 years in 2 weeks' time. And for me, there's a couple of times where it nearly hit the rocks and went pear-shaped. And that was primarily because we weren't communicating completely with one another. We weren't being honest and we weren't building that trust. And when we started getting back into that, we go through situations where there was a point in my life where my work was more important than the rest. And we all know that. But we managed to work through it. And what I have today is, again, it's built on relationships. So it starts with communication. It then develops into the relationship, which develops into mutual trust. And once you have that, your teams become more engaged and they become more inspired. So,
what do you think is key to good relationships with a team as a leader?
I think it's the connection. Like you say, your friend as well that was saying that it works better for him being face to face because there's that connection. We created as human beings to connect with one another. So the connection is caused through the communication. Now the communication, the 2 big factors in communication, it's not text and emails and that type of thing. It's physically having a conversation, looking one another in the eye, having a conversation, seeing whether the person's listening to you. And from a leader perspective, we've developed a society where we pop emails, we send short texts. I mean, these days I don't even understand half of it because the abbreviations, I got to read it 4 times before I understand the abbreviation. And what that's doing is it's become impersonal. So there's going to be no relationship. So if you're communicating, and especially in the beginning, it's going to take time. So if I can see you, if I can read your body language, I've got an idea whether you're listening to me. You can also, if I'm trying to start a conversation with you, you can determine whether I'm serious or not, or whether I'm just doing it because it's required of me as a leader. And I think that then eventually develops into a relationship and then develops into the trust. And once you have that, people then do things for the leader because they want to, not because they feel they have to, or it's because of the job. And it just makes the life of a leader easier after that.
So what do you run into most of the time that our listeners and viewers can take away that you have to deal with? Like, what's your top 3 things that when you go into an organization and you're training them and you're talking to them, what do you run across most often, and how do you find what do you find works well to move them? If we just had some quick takeaways for the people that listen.
It's actually quite strange. I'm busy writing a book on the top 10 mistakes leaders make. But the top 3 for me currently that I have encountered over the last couple of years, and especially since COVID, is firstly, lack of communication. As I've mentioned, I've now been ranting about communication. Lack of accountability. Accountability includes empathy as well. So it's allowing your people to make mistakes, but it's you owning up to your mistakes and you being accountable for your decisions and not trying to sweep it under the carpet.
Always somebody else's fault.
That, the corporate salute. So, the other one is, I think one that is missed a lot, that is very important, especially where leaders are struggling with team unity and that type of thing, is lack of self-care. Leaders don't look after themselves. They don't take time off. They don't self-care. Andy Bryant, who is an Australian, who lived in Singapore, now in Portugal, talks about self-leadership. So that's learning the skills. I'm talking about self-care, planning your time, taking time off. Yes, okay, there's the work-life balance, but it's more about looking after your well-being and planning your time to look after your health and look after yourself. And leaders don't do that because they get to a point where things aren't working out, so they've got to work 26 hours out of every 24 to try and keep the things going.
Right.
Whereas so there's other things that you can look at that makes it better and allows you to
so sorry. When you think about lack of communication, a lot of people think that they communicate effectively.
Yeah.
And they don't. Right.
Because they talk well.
Because they what?
Because they speak well.
Correct. I find that a lot of the times people will use verbiage that I'm not familiar with, nomenclature. I was taught always at Toastmasters and all the different speaking groups that I've been a part of is talk at the lowest level you're comfortable talking, then more people will understand. You're not talking down to them, but you're talking at a level that you're more comfortable instead of trying to put on airs or just use bigger words just because, it makes you sound smarter. Do you come across that a fair bit?
Yes. Okay. So first, so you're a fellow Toasty. Okay. I've also gone that route. And as I say, one thing, I'll give you an example of what happened to me. One of the speeches that I did, you know how Toastmasters works. You do a speech and you get an evaluator that gives you feedback. And this person said to me, I would have thought you would have spoken on this particular topic. I was thinking to myself, but weren't you listening? I did speak on that. And then I realized something afterwards. It's not about me saying, but I did speak about it. It's if you didn't hear me speak about it, I didn't say it properly or I didn't say it clearly enough. And that's the big thing with speaking. So a lot of things with communication, for me, it's not so much about the speaking. So when you're speaking, speak clearly. Don't use all kinds of technical terms and jargon and the rest of it if people don't understand it. So, I mean, I'm in one industry, you might be in a different industry, and I think I'm very clever using all these fancy words. So that's the one thing about it. The other part is I love concepts and things. So I have this thing called the Hive Blueprint, where I went and did studies and looked at the relationship between what bees do in a hive and how that applies to leadership. I have a thing called the leadership tree. I have a decoding your leadership style. So I have all these things. And one of the things that I came up with was a leadership, a communication recipe. So the recipe is 1 part speaking, 2 parts listening, and 3 parts understanding. And I think that's the biggest part about it, is me understanding you by listening to you, but also when I communicate that you actually understand what I am saying and that what the message is. And a big part of that is what I call feedback loops. So we very conditioned as a leader to give you feedback on how you're doing, but am I getting feedback from you on how I'm doing as a leader? So I think that's all part of that as part of communication for me.
And are you a fan of the leaders that say the best part of my job, or the way I help my teams, is I step out of the way and I support them and let them do what they need to do and see how I can add value to get them to do that, instead of leadership from the top down, or not?
I believe that it is a mix of 3 different situations. So if you know Hershey and Blanchard, they have a situational leadership model. So their situational leadership model says that your leadership style changes based on the situation you're in. Nelson Mandela, the famous president of South Africa, said that there's a time where you need to lead from the back, sometimes you need to lead from the middle, and sometimes you need to lead from the front, which is another way of explaining situational leadership. And I'm like that. So you're going to get a situation in the beginning where you need to lead from the front, where you need to give it, and you're going to get a point where you lead from the back. Yeah. Somebody like Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher from 550 BC, that said that a leader is at his most effective when the team achieves the goal and doesn't even realize the leader was there. So I think that's what it's about. And if you look at the trend today, it's, call it what you want to, servant leadership, leading from the back, leading from wherever. I think the thing with leading is the example, giving, showing the lead. So whether it means saying, come with me, whether it's saying, go, I'm here if you need me, or whether it's I'm holding your hand going with you, that's sort of my take on it.
Which is, so you adapt to the situation, as most good leaders do.
Yes.
I think, being married for almost 35 years, you would have found, like you said, with communication, where you stopped communicating. I find we've been married 33 and a half, and I find that we tend to start to have problems, and it mostly happens when we have a lot of other people around, like family in for the holidays or whatever, and somebody says something that your wife said this, not derogatory or anything, but just it could be basic. Oh, she needs you to pick up a pumpkin pie from the store, right? So you go get the pumpkin pie from the store and you bring back, she goes, what's that for? Well, such and such said that you need a pumpkin pie. No, I was saying I was going to make a pumpkin pie. Oh, why didn't you ask me? Well, we're all running around like kangaroos with our heads cut off, or chickens with our heads cut off, and we're not communicating. So we have found that just checking in with each other. Hey, are we good? Like, we seem like we're off, like, those Hong Kong kung fu movies where their lips aren't synced to the stuff, right? You're just off a little bit, right? I don't know if you ever find that in your marriage or in leadership, but and I've run into that. I've only got 3 employees, but I run into that with that sort of thing too. Sometimes where one of my main employee in another city says, "What's up with you?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she says, "Well, you posted this. Why were you having a go at me without having a go at me? If you got something to say, just say it direct." I'm like, it had absolutely nothing to do with you, and it had to do with a situation that I was dealing with outside the company, and it was just a little rant. She goes, "Oh, I thought that was all about me. Sorry, I should have given you a heads up."
No, I suppose if the shoe fits, wear it.
Yeah. Now,
I
Robin,
hear
if you're listening to this, it wasn't about you.
I hear what you're saying, and I think that's the important thing, because part of miscommunication is assumptions. So, I can assume that I know what you're talking about, but I don't clarify, I don't make 100% sure. Or, like you say, somebody gives me, communicate something with me, and I go and do it without checking in to make sure, that type of thing. And it probably has a lot to do with, we currently live in a society where everything is at breakneck speed. So everything is instant. I was saying to somebody the other day, I can remember a time when I would write a letter to my grandmother, and it would take me 2-3 days until I was happy with a letter, and I'd have a waste paper basket full of scrap paper, and then I'd post it, and then I'd wait for weeks to eventually get a reply. Now I send an email, I hit send and receive, and then 3 seconds later I hit send and receive to see if they've replied yet. I think it's that culture that we've developed. So we don't go and check in. I don't go and make sure, is this what you actually said, or was that what was meant, or was it aimed at me, or even in your case, as you say, if did I make sure that I discussed it with people? I've had that a lot of times. Then I don't know. I sometimes still believe that my wife didn't listen to me, but the other day I came again and said, "Oh, yes, I'm not looking forward to that meeting next week in Windhoek." Meeting? What meeting? Are you going to Windhoek? You didn't tell me. So you're sleeping over? That type of thing. So I think sometimes it is a question that maybe I did say it, but we tend to say it and then not follow up that the person that was supposed to hear it, did they hear it? So
like off the cuff, like off the cuff, or we didn't clarify. A lot of the times is early in our marriage, and it translates exactly over into teams and one-on-one relationships within companies too, was that, hey, what you said, this is what I heard. No, that's not what I meant at all. What I meant was, oh, okay, just to clarify, so what you're saying is this, and the intent of that is this, and then I should do this. Exactly. Okay, I'm glad I clarified. And that's a bit stilted. It was more conversational when it happens, but we had to have that format early on, just because there was a lot of misunderstandings between Australians and Americans. Just like with South Africans, our language, our English is English-based. American English, although it's English-based, is American English. So South African English, American English, Australian English, and English, they're all different. Right.
And we speak some funny combination.
Yeah. And things that we can say that mean exactly that. So one of the examples I have is in Australia, a sloppy Joe is a sweatshirt. Okay, so what what Americans call a sweatshirt, in Australia we call a sloppy Joe, like a tracksuit top, right? Well, they have sandwiches in America called sloppy Joes. So the first time my wife says we're gonna have sloppy Joes for dinner, I'm like, we got to wear a sweatshirt to dinner?
Like, you're gonna eat the sweatshirt?
Yeah, we're gonna eat this. What's going on? She goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, you said a sloppy Joe. A sloppy Joe is a jacket, is a coat. She goes, no, it's a sandwich. So just stupid stuff like that. You would say things like, for me, if you and I are building a relationship, then what we know about Namibia, South Africa, Australia, we know that we're going to give each other a hard time, because the more we like each other, the more we trash talk, right? The more we sledge. And in America, when I make a joke, I don't tell them I'm just kidding. But Americans in general, when they make a joke or have fun with someone, they say, oh, I'm just kidding. The first time I said that to my South African friend, he said, I know that. Like, I wouldn't expect anything else. Like, you wouldn't be serious about what you just said, right? And so just the way we communicate is different, and you have to use different language, and you have to react differently, and you have to make sure that the communication is understood, that you're not trying to hurt somebody's feelings, that you're actually just having some fun. I don't know if you run into that at all.
I think it comes back to the building the relationship. So through the steps of communication and building trust and all the rest of it, you build a relationship. I know, I mean, that I can say something which could be a bit of a dig at you, but it could, to me, be hilarious, and you'll understand it, and you'll take it, like you said, with the writing, being South African. But so it's those type of things, because I understand, apart from the like you say, the relationship between the different cultures and that. But as you and your wife, your team, your business partners, whatever, start developing a relationship, you know what you can say and what you can't say. You know when it will be a step too far. It's like you said, so if I say certain things, now, I mean, you would know, if I live in Africa, so southern part of Africa, we have a rich or dark history of grouping, discrimination against race and all that type of thing. So you've got to be very careful. Even sometimes if I say something that I think is hilariously funny, I might actually critically offend somebody else. So that comes out when you build relationships. You know what you can and can't say and who you can say it to and that type of thing. It also helps to understand whether the person is actually kidding without them having to tell you that they're kidding.
Right. So when it comes to, so a lot of our listeners are small business owners across America that are looking for takeaways that they can use in their small organization. Sometimes it's 1 to 5 employees. It's a lot of solo entrepreneurs, and their relationship building is through open networking, or, going to chamber events, that sort of stuff, across a beer or across a cup of coffee, or just having some lunch. What are some good tips you might have for those small, those solo entrepreneurs or the small businesses about communication and leadership?
I think for a smaller person and a solopreneur, or a smaller business, micro, small, depending on how you want to, but 5 to 10 people maximum, I think it's a lot easier establishing those communication channels, because you have closer contact with a person than a large international corporate, where the person working in Hong Kong has never even met the CEOs in New York. Might have heard of him. If they're lucky, they might have seen a photograph of them or whatever. I don't know if you ever, in the US, they had, a while back, they had that TV show, Undercover Boss.
Right.
And that actually showed you that there wasn't. So then I think what you need to do with the larger organizations is then find a different way of communicating. But with a small organization, like with myself, you have regular sit downs. We have an office. I'm in Swakop. The people that I now in Namibia work for, we have an office in Windhoek, and we regularly just sit down and chat, even if it's via Zoom or phone call or whatever, and just stay connected so that we know where we are, that you don't hear something and then make the wrong assumption. My business in South Africa, I have a lady that sort of manages and runs it for me, and we regularly connect with one another. If I go down to South Africa, we go have coffee and we chat. So, but we are connected via email, via WhatsApp and the rest of it. But you need to have that one-on-one every now and then, just to see how's the person doing, just to check in, is everything okay? Because, I mean, you know yourself, you'd have an employee that you can crack a joke today and they'll laugh, and tomorrow there's something that happened that the emotional state is slightly different or not as good. Maybe the kid got knocked off the bike or something like that. And then they're not going to think your joke's funny at all. So as a leader, you need to be able to, the more you connect, the more you communicate, and the more you build the relationships, you are better able to see, but hold on, this person is not themselves. So I need to either find out what's going on, or I've got to be careful. I've got to be be a bit more sensitive in my communication, one of those type of things.
Rowan, for a small business owner, do you have one of your books that you recommend as a good reading material for them to learn this stuff?
Okay, the two bestseller books, I'll mention three of them. The two bestseller books is the previous one was called Fundamentals of Management, which is basically what I did was I took management back to basics. It was during COVID, and with everybody stressing and running all over the place and freaking out because things weren't suddenly working, I thought maybe a person should get back to basics. So it's a chapter on how teams operate and understanding teams and why they are the way they are. There's a section on your leadership and your style of leadership and how to lead. And then the things like delegating, problem solving, communication, motivational skills, those type of things. There's also an additional chapter on leading remotely. The last one, or the previous one that went to number one as well, it was actually from my Christian faith. I decided to take leadership, the universal leadership principles that are required, like leading by example and all these things and communication, but I linked it to biblical references. So that's called Relational Leadership, 21 Leadership Lessons from the Word of God. It's not a religious book to try and convert people to Christianity or whatever. It is a book that it was written, and just because of my beliefs, I decided to have a look, but what does the Bible say about leadership? And I try to connect to. So an example I can give you is like leading by example. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus asked the disciples, who do the people say I am? I turned it the other way around and I said, as a leader, who do the people say you are? So can they see you're a leader? Or do you need to keep explaining, oh, but I'm the leader? There was a He-Man thing, me have sword, me leader. So it's that type of thing. And I don't know if I should mention it because you are Australian, but that book, the foreword, was written by a New Zealand friend of mine called Elias Canaris.
That's a problem right there. I was with you until then. No. Yeah,
that's right.
And that's our group, right? That's the group. Is like Australians and New Zealanders will stand together, the Anzacs, and fight anybody else. But when we're not fighting anybody else, we're going to fight each other, right? We're going to have fun with each other. So
it's the same as in South Africa. We'll all support the rugby and the cricket, and then when it's over, then the English and the Afrikaans speaking communities, they don't get along and they differ.
Right.
But and then the other book, the last one that went, is a sort of cooperative effort. I belong to a mastermind group called the Circle of Excellence, which is headed by another New Zealander, Mike Hancock, who now is married to a South African, lives in South Africa. And there were 14 of us that are members of the Circle of Excellence that each wrote a chapter. And it's about entrepreneurship, and it's about our entrepreneurial journey, where it comes from. Mine's called Zero to Hero because of, as I explained to you earlier, where I was retrenched and was jobless, and that then forced me to start my own business, and where I am now 25 years later. So those are the books. It's called Conscious Leadership, how conscious leaders play a bigger game. They're all on Amazon.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, whether they were all on Amazon or not. And digital as well as print, I would say.
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, because this is what I enjoy. I left school at 15 to start my first business, grew up around a bunch of entrepreneurs. Did you grow up around an entrepreneurial family?
No, I unfortunately grew up in the old traditional, I'm a boomer. I'm taking you probably close to I'm 63, so
I'm 56.
Okay, so
as of this, when we're recording it, but somebody might be watching it 50 years from now, and we'll both be gone.
Exactly. But as I said, the boomers grew up in an age where you were taught, get a decent job, work there for 40, 45 years, get the golden handshake and the watch, get a decent medical benefit and a decent pension fund. And that was the route I was on, and I was studying and everything and the rest of it. And then, as I say, I got the carpet pulled out from under me, and I toyed with this idea for a while, but I'd like to do things my way, and I'd like to start my own business. I was a group training manager for a large corporate, and suddenly they decided to close down, and we got retrenched, and there I was. So I was forced into it.
Just a second. For those of you that don't know what retrenched is, the equivalent in the US would be laid off. So he was laid off, let go, retrenched. So we use that.
Yeah, it's being fired, but receiving a severance package. Right, same sort of thing. Yeah. And then, fortunately, what happened is the company that I was working for, myself and the accountant got kept back, and we worked under contract because they had a large insurance debtors book that hadn't been done. So I was paid a commission for every one of these debtors that I solved and got payments for. I ended up getting paid more in that year than I got paid in the 6 years I worked for them.
Right.
But that also gave me the freedom to use their resources. I had an office space and I could start building my business. So I was lucky that I could build my business so that in a year's time, when the contract was finished, I didn't suddenly go sit in the street and not have food to eat and not be able to feed my family. So that was a fortunate part that came. But then I ended up working for myself. Now, people have said to me, actually yesterday somebody said to me, so what's it feel like working for somebody again? Well, it's restrictive because I was used to doing my own thing and making my own decisions. Yeah. But on the other hand, at my age, I now get a steady salary every month. I don't have to worry about OPEX, operating expenses. I don't have to worry about paying rent and salaries. Somebody else now does that. And I do what I love. I write. I develop training programs and that type of thing. So it's the big thing is I didn't grow up in an entrepreneurial environment. I was sort of forced into it. And it was, in fact, I only started becoming good at being an entrepreneur about 4 or 5 years ago when I got introduced to the Circle of Excellence, which is basically, as I say, it's a mastermind. It's a group of entrepreneurs spread across, I think, 33, 34 different countries across the world. And we have weekly mastermind sessions where there's teaching and there's coaching and that type of thing. And it's sort of become a mutual mentoring, if you want, because each one of us has an opportunity to present one of the masterminds. So there's this cross-pollination.
Which involves a lot of trust and a lot of vulnerability, right? Where you can open up about the challenges you're having. I think mastermind groups, wherever you are in the world, I think they have very good value. And I see from free masterminds up to 20,000 a month masterminds. So it just depends on where you fit in and what you're looking to do, I think, with your business or with your career. But folks, if you're out there, look for a mastermind group or start one, find people in different industries that you like, know, and trust that can bring different things to the table. So, Rowan, how long have you said you've been involved with that? 4 to 5 years?
Yes.
And do you guys meet on Zoom then?
We have Zoom sessions. We got guys from all over the world. Right. So it would be sort of, I think, late evening. Okay, in US time, it's sort of early hours of the morning. So it's 9 a.m. Central Africa time, which is, depending on where you are in the US, could be anything between midnight and 2 in the morning.
Right. So as we record this, it's 10 a.m. here Central time. What is it where you're at?
Currently here, it's 5 in the afternoon.
Right. Okay.
So the thing is, okay, so you 10 a.m. here, so you're 7 hours behind roughly. The thing with it is it gets recorded as well. So we have a closed Facebook group where we all belong to, and the recording is there. So if I didn't manage it, I can at least be part of the recording. The thing is, if I'm on the live session, I can ask questions, you can engage with one another, that type of thing. So there is, it's for me, it's vital. I mean, that is the one mastermind. I've been part of a number of other masterminds. But this one, especially for me, from an entrepreneurial perspective, is it's run by somebody who has years of experience as an entrepreneur and has helped thousands of entrepreneurs develop. But it's also the people that are on there are now successful business owners, successful entrepreneurs, but they stay part of it and they keep contributing. So there's constant value being given to ever, whether you knew or whether you've been around for a while, there's constant value. And like you said, I mean, I would definitely promote masterminds. If you want not just one mentor, but a group of mentors, join a mastermind. Like you say, somebody that you trust, somebody that you look up to, somebody that you believe can add value, and join that mastermind, or start your own.
Yeah, very good. So one of the questions I like to ask is, what's something, you've probably been interviewed a lot. I know you do a lot of speaking. What's something that you always want to be asked, but very few interviewers ask you about?
That I want to be asked that they don't ask.
Right, like a question that you would like me to ask that I don't even know to ask, that you would like to talk on that I haven't asked about.
I don't know, really. It's just you get the normal ones, but I mean, if I would really want you to ask a question, would be why am I passionate about leadership? I suppose it's
okay. So why are you passionate about leadership?
Because everybody seems to talk the talk, and there are, I think it's something like 1.7 million books on Amazon on leadership, and still they're not doing it right. So why are they not implementing what they claim to know? So that's my thing, is because for me, it's the leadership is actually the vehicle to the relationships. I believe that you need to have those relationships. And I believe that leaders have got to a point where and there's a lot of my friends in South Africa that are in training and business that say to me, stop saying there's a difference between management and leadership. But I won't, because there is a difference between management and leadership. Managers enforce, leaders inspire. And I think that's the big thing.
Writing that down.
Yeah. I usually, we have EI, emotional intelligence. So I say leadership EI is managers enforce and instruct, leaders empower and inspire. So it's just to link it to the EI. But I think that's the big thing. And that's the reason why the Maxwells and the Blanchards and the Cynics and these guys are successful speakers and trainers, is because we keep having business, because people don't want to apply it. They don't want to apply what is being learned. Everybody says, yes, I know. Everybody raves about Simon Sinek's books or John Maxwell's books or whatever. Hopefully they rave about mine as well. But I don't see them applying it. And that's the thing. So my passion is, if I can leave one legacy, my legacy would be that you built a relationship with your team, and that made them successful, but you got along. Because that's the reason why there's burnout with leaders, and that is because we're stressing like crazy because things are not happening, and it's not, the team's not engaged, and we're not getting there. We're not building the relationships. So if that's the only thing that I can do is teach people, leaders, how to build relationships, then that's why I'm passionate about it.
And genuine, authentic relationships, right?
That's it.
That's the hard part, is people come up to me all the time. They go, yeah, and I'm loud, obnoxious. I'm an extrovert, but actually I'm an introvert that learned how to become extroverted. And people go, oh, I wish I could be more like you. No. You need to be more like yourself. You need to lean into who you are as a person. Don't try and copy somebody. Now, if you like some traits, you can learn those traits. A lot of leadership is learned behavior, right? You can learn to be a better leader. That's why we have books. That's why we have trainings. And like you said, if they would actually implement the stuff that they could learn. But I tell them, lean into who you are. What drives you? What's your passion? And let people know what your passion is and why you're doing what you do. And we have a lot of nonprofits that are small and they're really good at their mission, but they're hard. They have a hard time to explain their mission or why they're doing what they do, right? And that's a different thing too, right? You could say it falls under marketing, but it also falls under leadership as they continue to grow their nonprofit. And as a Christian, I'm the same as you. In the South, it's pretty easy to share your faith. People aren't really, giving you a hard time, you can pray when you go out to eat, and you can talk about, normally the first question at a networking event in Southern United States is, oh, so what church do you go to? Well, you wouldn't get that in the North, but you do get that in the South, right? And so you have to understand, if you're a Southerner and you go North, that question is not going to be received well in most cases, but in the South it is. So I use a social media platform that's only US and Canada, and I ran an event, and I'm on the board of the Tennessee Christian Chamber of Commerce. And so I listed that event as the Tennessee Christian Chamber of Commerce networking event on this social media platform. And corporate called me up and said, hey, you can't list a religious event. I said, it's a networking event run by a chamber that happens to be Christian. You forget this is the Southern United States. And she goes, oh, yeah, you're right. There's a church on every corner. I grew up in Australia. There was a pub on every corner. Here in the South, there's a church on every corner, and there's normally two behind that.
There's a place, a small town in South Africa, a little coastal town in Cape Town, where the pub and the church are right next to one another. But
makes sense to me. After church, go have a beer.
The thing is, okay, speaking about being a Christian, that's one belief. For me, the thing is two things. What you've now said that applies throughout life in general, it's not just leaders, is the first one is you mentioned about trying to be like somebody else. I can't remember, it wasn't me, but I heard it, somebody once asked, if you keep trying to be like somebody else, who's being like you? So that's the one thing. So be yourself, whether you're a leader or wherever you are. And to add on to that, and that is why I sort of call it moved or diverged or niched a lot narrower into, I focus a lot on Christian leadership as well, where I speak to church leaders and Christian leaders and that type of thing. And that's because somebody that, by the way, wasn't even a Christian, said to me that if you're a Christian, you need to stand on what you believe. You need to stand for something. And if you say you stand for it, then stand for it. So be yourself and stand up for your beliefs and your values, but don't tread on somebody else's beliefs and values. So if you want to stand up for your own rights and your own beliefs and values, that's good, that's right. But don't trash somebody else's in the process to try and stand on you. That, I think that's the trick, because in a lot of instances, people, oh, you can't speak about Christianity, or you can't speak about this, or you can't speak about that, why not? If that's what I believe in, then I speak about it, because that's my conviction. As long as I don't say, okay, only, so in other words, you were saying, Christian, everything has to be Christian. No, tolerate the other people and accommodate them. Stand up for what you believe in. So if you're a leader, stand for your beliefs and your values. You need to have values. You can't do anything. You can't run an organization. You can't be a parent. You can't anything in life without proper values. And you need to stand on those values and not be afraid of them, not be ashamed of them. Because if you're ashamed of them, why do you have them in the first place? So right. For me, that's the big thing. And as I say, it's not just in leadership. I think it's throughout life. It's a lesson that people should take.
Well, I think every one of us is a leader, right? We lead ourselves. We have to be, like you said, self-care. We have to control ourselves. Mm-hmm. So every one of us is a leader to us. If we're not leading anybody else, we still have to lead and manage our own life, which is leadership. And so I think what you said is exactly key. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here. What do you do when you're not working, Rowan? What's your passion outside of work?
My passion outside of work is my grandkids, when I do get the chance, but also I come from a very musical family. As a sort of, I'd call it a side hustle. I've written a number of songs. I've got a couple of awards. I've made a couple of CDs. And then I play in the worship team at church. That for me is something totally different, because I don't lead the worship team. So it's something totally different from the leadership, but it's something I enjoy. And I love music. And if I really need to escape and just sort of clear my mind, then I pick up my guitar, and that's it for me. So
there you go.
and I
Well,
read a lot. So
thank you for sharing. Do you have a favorite dad joke that I might get?
I don't know. I was thinking, I know that it was asked, but the only dad joke that I can think of is actually somebody told it the other day again. It's an old joke where the father was lying on his deathbed, and he was asked his wife, he said, please be honest with me. Yeah, I want to know truthfully. Yeah, I have 6 sons, but the last one has red hair, and he doesn't look like any of the others. Are you sure he's my son? And she said, yes, he's your son. The other 5 aren't. So
yeah, that is an oldie but a goodie. Yeah.
Yeah, it's only one I could think of.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Rowan, hey, I appreciate having you on the show. If somebody wants to connect with you, do you use LinkedIn? Is there a better way for people to connect with you than another?
Okay, I see on the bottom of the screen, so they're watching it to spell my name, Rowan, which is English, and Van Dyk or Van Dyk, how you want to say it, VANDYK, all lowercase, all one word.com is my website. And if you look for Rowan van Dyk on LinkedIn, you'll find me on LinkedIn. I think those are probably the 2 best platforms. So you find a lot of stuff on the website. I do, when I get chance, post some blogs and things about leadership, but also reasonably active on LinkedIn. You'll find me there. Okay. And we can chat.
Awesome, Rowan. Hey, thanks for being on the show.
It's an absolute pleasure.
G'day again. Well, that's it for the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like us, subscribe, follow, write a 5-star review, you know, all the good stuff. Thanks a lot for listening, and look forward to having you listen to the next one.